in more in the prose world. It's one of those crafts that I definitely look at from afar and say, wow, that's really awesome. I know a decent amount about poetry, but not like crazy amount. But I read a decent amount of it, so hopefully we can give some good insights to this awesome poetry collection before the little baby wakes up and freaks out. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so liberation or wobble of the moon, or maybe I know libration. Libration, yeah. The wave of the moon is perceived by the earthbound observers depending on the hemisphere in which they stand. Librations allow earthbound observers to peek around the moon's edges. Very good. So there's this. I like the definition. I really like a lot of poetry's a lot of poets I've read have done some really interesting stuff with like found stuff. So they pull text out of certain areas, and even pulling definitions out of the dictionary and having these kind of interesting definitions can add this layer of depth. I think one of the things that makes some poetry work really, really well is these voices coming in from different areas. So, you have this very structured definition of like, okay, this is what this term means. And then you open up into, maybe a more personal poem. And those contrasts really can bring out a more complete picture than maybe they could individually. So this is awesome. I like I like the use of a definition and footnote. Those are always really fun. I like the idea, and this is hopefully establishing some concepts that I'm going to be looking for them to recur, right? So the concepts that I'm going to be looking for is, peeking beyond the moon. If I could spell peeking. Oh, my thing's too big there. There we go. Peeking beyond the moon, seeing like this sight, versus, earthbound people, trying to see, beyond. So like this kind of sense of being confined, being earthbound, and having these glimpses of something more expansive. So those are going to be kind of things that this particular introduction. I mean, this is their first page. This is where a lot of the, table is being set in so many ways. So I'm going to be looking for some of those ideas to recur. All right, so awesome. So we got some of the structure. I like this degrees, these moon jar degrees. I looked over this before, so I really like this kind of use of imagery as well as poetry. I think that's always really, really neat. Um, yeah, peregrine apogee. I think those are phases of the moon, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like waxes and waning, right? I think so. Should I look it up? Probably. Anyways, so I'm really excited. The first poem of a collection is the big Mamajamma, right? It's very important. So usually, like my friends of mine from grad school who went and published poetry collections, usually their first poem was one of their kind of poems that they got published already. That was pretty kind of reminiscent of their work, like kind of like the encapsulating thing. So I'm excited to read it. I think this is page 3 officially. What does PDF say? Yeah, page 3. Page 3. All right, Mystic Mindscapes after Young Hagway. I'm gonna probably butcher a lot of these words, so please forgive me. Diadems of light leap from radial geometries and migrate in isosceles formations against a wall stapled by steel. So very interesting intro, right? We're getting a very sort of linear, very like geographical, obviously with stuff like words like isosceles. So it's kind of bringing me into this very geographical structure. The splattered kaleidoscope multiplies into new cosmos, every sweeping lustrum cartwheeling an unpinnable color. Meanwhile, rustic buntings trill the silence as two fate makers cross divides and disappear from earshot and secret conversation. While the whole world imagines what borderland of mind within us could possibly blossom the scarcely human pace where songbirds gather broken twigs and bones across the 4-kilometer wide expanse, policed by electric fences and landmines, a tyranny of tank traps, women shamans. So we're getting more into the we're going kind of from the abstract into the concrete, which I think is good. They don't, at least in my current reading, I'm not seeing, I see kind of the isosceles formations of walls stapled by steel. That kind of implies some militaristic feeling. But it seems like a bit of a sharp transition from some very image and conceptual language, which is always a little harder to walk into a poetry book and be having more conceptual language up front is a little tough. Very hard to visualize. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just making this poem a little bit harder for me to access. So like the beginning, oops, I think like the first stanza works, but the following ones continue in such a conceptual manner that when the more concrete descriptions arise, I have trouble connecting ideas from the two. So I think that's potentially the effect it seems like you're looking to create, where you kind of build this abstract vision and then it falls into focus in this concrete thing. But I think we need a few more threads of the concrete. So like, meanwhile, rustic bunting, okay, splatter clyster multiplies into a new cosmos. Like, cosmos is so pulled back from the concrete that I'm, gonna have trouble zooming into like kind of this more war torn, gather, in Fort Kimon, where wide expanse policed by electric fences and landmines, a tyranny of tank. So like, also great alliteration. I'm a big alliteration fan, but again, like, we're getting into this very concrete imagery on stanza 5, but it's a little bit um, it doesn't I guess feel as seamless of a transition from this more conceptual abstract language to this more concrete language. I feel like we need a little bit more of a transition. Um, um, Again, I'm not a poetry expert. I'm a fiction guy and a very structure driven writer. So, um, grain of salt. Grain of salt. Women shamans class symbols in a rite of sound, interceding with temperamental gods for whom the ritual is never enough. I like that. I like a lot of these concepts that are coming across, but it's still um, I kind of still need something concrete to pin them on, at least for my reading. To keep an open border between spirit world and earth, a series of handles, every push, a pull, consequence. I like that this doesn't close, or that you're using the parentheses inversely. I think that's a really cool device. I've not seen that before. Um, a bargain to belong. The bodies of this landscape are clad in skins of nickel-plated bells with sonorous shimmer at every twist of torso. Every twist, another iridescent pattern refracts into modes of being. The gatekeepers are overwhelmed by constant rivals. Unpinnable moment. What on earth on you? Birdsong dongs, the outpost of the last couplet in brevity, belonging. So I think your word choice is really, really. Alexis, hello, how's it going? Welcome, good to see you. We're doing an edit of someone else's work, so this is actually what this channel started as, me doing edits, and this is something that's really exciting. We're doing some how does one say, poetry. So that's really, really exciting. How you doing, buddy? You spit out your pacifier. That's always going to be a bad time, spitting out pacifiers. Anyways, the little buddy is chilling over here. Hopefully we can read through this collection. Thankfully it's pretty short. It's only about 30 pages, so I have a good feeling. Not thankfully, like, but like more, it's like, oh, I think I can get done with 30 pages in an hour or two. So that's exciting. So I hope, because I want to be able to look at this whole collection as a whole if I can. So again, like the language, like the word choice is really sharp. I think I still am leaning towards this. There's a little bit of like I'm not able to pin all these around an idea yet. Like, at least maybe I'm like kind of not the most um concrete reader. I still am having trouble pinning all these beautiful, descriptions and conceptual images um, around a single theme or um, emotion. Yeah. So that's the thing. I think there's these really, really sharp pieces, but I don't know if they've coalesced into something. And whether that means, hey, we bring some of these concrete description points into the abstract so we can say, oh, this is how these connect together. Or maybe, there are some more signposts in the abstract that says, hey, this is kind of what I'm getting at. I'm tired. Hang in there, Alexis. I'm doing okay. I had an early wake up with little buddy today, but thankfully still kicking. So perigi. I think I probably need to look these words up. Yeah. I probably need to look these words up as much as I. Oh, I guess there's a definition down there. Oh, thank goodness for footnotes. So that's interesting. That's exactly the same as Google. The point in the moon's orbit nearest the Earth. And I guess you changed some of it. You didn't have the satellite at which, yeah. The point where the moon is nearest the Earth, where the Earth is predetermined the center. By the center, I mean a foreign place. Um, Again, I like the use of these footnotes. I think they're a really cool way of kind of adding emotion. I think it's a really, really clever thing. My challenge is I like this contrast of the center and a foreign place, but I don't um I don't necessarily, those seem to be a little bit too in contrast. And from my point of view, we're like, hey, by being the center, foreignness doesn't necessarily come is not really a denotation coming out of that, right? I really like this first section where the Earth is predetermined the center. So like this assumption of this Earth being the center, that type of thing is really, really interesting. Um, you know the you know you know but the foreign place portion doesn't feel an accurate description of a center. Yeah, I think, and like obviously I know you're being very, very meticulous in your word choice, but I feel like for some reason that's just not adding up. Um, I remember yesterday whenever it was I was narrating my cat's life, I remember that was a really fun narration. So these are the moon jars from what I courtesy of YSP Gallery. That's awesome. It's a really great shot. Um, Really cool. Whoever took that photo, that's pretty amazing. Love the photo. I like the use of mixed media. One really interesting book we read in grad school, which is obviously it's a very grad schooly thing to read. But uh, they A visit from the Goon Squad where they have like a PowerPoint presentation in it. Obviously if you're going to use mixed media, like that one actually made me laugh because like as a business guy, I know all how to set up a PowerPoint. So I was a little like, I was like, oh, like, you shouldn't, like, most people in a business setting wouldn't use this. So maybe I was not the right audience maybe for that, but I thought it was again a cool concept to tell a story through PowerPoint and these types of things, which some of the new media and mixed media approaches are coming from. Moon jar is 0 degrees. Moon jars are named for how their hue and shade shift according to where their onlooker stands in relation to it. So this has a much stronger opening, right? Because I'm anchored in a concrete thing, at least between the initial poem, right? So like anchoring me in a very concrete thing in the moon jar is going to help me because then as we move out into abstraction, I know that these are all kind of concepts that are emerging out of this base. So that's a really, really great start. I think that's awesome. Really great that you anchor me in the concrete object of a moon jar. Now all the other, ideas will emerge from this space. Sorry, I know you already know this. You're a great poet. But yeah, again, like we're hopefully helping some other writers out there work with their poetry. So if things are redundant, or let me know if it's like, okay, we get it, Jeff. So because I have no self-control, I created a whole world about it. Now I have a new book instead of having a short story. Oh no! Well, try a flash fiction. Try a flash fiction first. That's what I always say, because I know you were sharing that finishing stories was a challenge for you, and I think that's a challenge for most writers. So what a lot of writers will do when they have this thing where they say, "Oh, I had this idea, I'm going to blow it up, make it huge," is they'll sometimes do connected short stories. So they'll have a single little, short story that's standalone, but then they will build a larger story out of these smaller standalone stories. So that might be an avenue to look at if you're worried about, oh my goodness, I just signed up for a whole new novel. Which is great if that's what you want to do. But if you, like many writers, have trouble getting to the end of whatever project you're working on, or have so many projects going that it sometimes gets a little muddied, that's definitely an avenue worth exploring. Where's my... Hold on a moment. I think my... Oh, I think my wife might have taken my Fitbit charger. Just kidding. She's in big trouble now. It's all good. All right. Moon jars are named for how their hue and shade shift according to where the onlooker stands in relation to it. Much like the moon's appearance shifts according to how we Earth dwellers perceive it from our tiny corner of the universe. At certain angles. So, one thing I will say is tiny corner of the universe is somewhat of a tried saying. I wonder if you can connect this to that initial footnote where you're like, from our, minuscule vantage point, something that kind of brings me back to this, trying to peer over the edge of what we can experience, right? Tiny corner of the universe is a, used phrase, is there another way to say this that ties more into your themes? At certain angles, light mesmerizes the milky glaze of the moon jar to one gleaming point. At others, a silhouette ripples along the edges of the moon jar's body as it pulls away from the light. To be between languages, in my mind, is just as capricious, something that can never be perfectly pinned down. To straddle language presents the predicament of choice. Which language? So I like kind of this, silhouette ripples the moon jar's body. So that kind of has a kind of personification, like it feels like you would be maybe describing somebody. So that's like a very interesting turn in kind of how this poem is developing. So I like that. To straddle language presents the predicament of choice. Which language will you make your moon and which your earth? Which sits in the center and which on the outside? And which orbits maybe? I wonder. I guess yeah. What are the languages lost in making such a choice, and what survives? Moon jars are an art form story by survival in both historical and cultural sense. Born in the Joseon dynasty, moon jars have survived wars, brutality, occupation, humiliation, obliteration, loss. The perils are just as grave as the actual creation of a moon jar, making odds of survival, the lopsided proportions, warping, low viscosity, cracking. Yeah. So I mean, lists are always a powerhouse in writing. If you are, doing a list, it's always generally a really, really great tool. So, like the use of lists and, parentheticals. HTTLS here. Spelling, it's hard. So awesome. Surveying is a matter of the maker's hyper. So also we also get this connection of language to this kind of phasing of the moon and who orbits whom. I think that's a really interesting concept. So I think I'm going to be looking to explore that more, right? So especially in these moon poems, so these moon jar poems, I would be expecting to see this like orbiting, like okay. I finished the first finished the 1.5 liter of Pepsi. Let me tell you, I'm not proud of that. I slept for like 3 hours, but I need to write before the words scrape from my head. Well, hang in there and keep writing. Oh, it's cool. I have time. At least that's what people say, because I word on different things at the same time. I work on my progress is slow, but it's in all stories. Well, that sounds good as long as you feel confident that you can, see them to the end. I'll be excited to see what you come up with in your in your cat drama. Surviving is a matter of the maker's hypervigilance to all these, but even with the favorable conditions in place, only 10% of moon jars survive. So I like this. This gives some stakes. So I think that's something really well worth keeping, right? This 10% survival gives stakes. The inverse. um, Decimation. This makes me feel like there's risk and import to what's being said. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great decision to have this end with some stakes and this like survival rate, right? To create change of name. Yeah. The change of name from kind of the birth names to the things. So I'll scroll through this pretty quick here. I don't, yeah. I think that's a really interesting concept, though. I think these, like, the change of name thing is a really interesting, uh, like this coming after, this, which language wins, poem about the moon jars. Uh, so yeah, I think that's a really great concept, like a really great organizational tool, right? Is you have this change of name certificate coming right after, talking about, which is the center, which kind of background or culture is my center, which language is the center. Um, but what I'm writing doesn't make sense. A fantasy with sci-fi, if that makes sense. Oh, there's a lot of sci-fi fantasy. I think it'll be a lot. Just have fun. I think one thing I always encourage, if you're doing a fun project, try not to let it become a burdensome thing. I think that's something a lot of writers struggle with, is they're, just having fun, whipping stuff up, and that you can really read it in someone's work. So try to just, turn off the internal critic and keep having fun throughout the process if you can. Moon phases, page 8. Oops. That's not really. Oh, that's still visible. Yay. The soothsayer gave shape to my mother's uncertainty based on birth dates and moon phases. The numerology of strewn stars aligned to a name that would become mine. The fickle cuckoo clock of my mother loved announced arbitrary hours around the house for sleepovers. HPV shots were taboo, and nail polish too. She wound twine tight around my fingers to dye them with balsam petals in the same persimmon shade of her CVS lipstick. They returned to the old country in search, but they did not find. Blooming in the backyard, my father spent hours on his knees planting his perennial pain in the battered. Okay. So let me think. So I really like the intro. I like the anchor of the mother. Um. Other family situation. There is a true boss. Hey, buddy. What's going on? What's going on, buddy? Tummy ache? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You just keep chilling, buddy. Barbara from Barbie to Barbara. That's intense. I guess oh, the cat's a dragon now. And the first line of my plan. It's awesome. Well, I mean, cats and dragons are pretty much the same. They have the same entitlement, don't they? And they hoard things. They returned to the old country in search of what they did not find, blooming in the backyard. In search for? In search of, maybe? I think that's maybe just a weird in search of. P8. That's not a huge thing. But they did not, you know. The other stuff, I don't know. Like, pain is a pretty vague word, right? Like, that could mean, like, back pain. Like, and obviously I know from context that's not what it is. But, like, what perennial pain? I kind of want to get a little bit more concrete about that. I think that's, like, a pretty central idea of this story is that, or this poem, is, like, your mother's kind of approach to the new world is kind of this shutting down of or just avoiding maybe this more Western kind of talk about femininity, right? So she's kind of, um, yes, and she's sticking with her kind of her, or she's doing kind of a different version of it, I guess. And then at least that's maybe my reading. Obviously, not not an expert by any means, but yeah. But then when I kind of get to this section here about your dad's thing, I'm having he's in the garden. I can kind of get that image, but I need a little bit more of a sense of the emotional side, right? So here I see this kind of idea of repression. We don't talk about, sleepovers and taboo and all these things are taboo. But pain with there we go. My headphone likes to turn off randomly. But pain without giving me a little bit of context, I can't really connect it to is it, this loss of being home, the calcium my brother's bones real tight, and the battered zipper was of mine was the calcium contraband concealed past the chill gaze of the customs officer, arbiter of my allegiance. Oh, interesting. So is this like bringing the cremation remains back home? It's arbiter of my allegiances. So I like the use of parentheticals. Again, I wonder if we can get a clear loss, um, you know, um, I drag my bags since across the doorways. I've dragged my bags since across the doorways under basement bunk beds, teetered precariously up attic ladders, schlepped past the red lights to catch greyhounds, pulling away from their terminals at Baywick until arriving year after year to the place I left my souls in the mud, gazing up at the honey glow orb in the sky, mirroring my return. So again, I like the inverse parentheticals. I think that's a really, really cool device, and I think you should definitely keep using that for like especially making certain sentences pop. Um, uh, um, Probably would have to read this a few times to get a clearer picture. Kind of looking over this, I'm trying to kind of look at, and maybe it's just my own structural brain where like, I see this before you were born, your mother's approach to kind of this separation, and this is your, father's approach to this separation, and then this is yours, right? This kind of this more transient experience of going between these worlds and kind of switching between them. So I think that's an interesting thing. I feel like it's still, and maybe this is my own preference. So like again, like poetry is probably tough because it is so subjective. I think in terms of a lot of the techniques, they're all pretty strong. Like we're ending lines with really strong words. Um, and especially this, like, and you can just, they always say you can kind of get the, if you can get the gist of the poem by reading the line endings, you'll know, right? So we get shape, uncertainty, phases, aligned, mind, like, so we're getting this, like, this imbalance, right? We get loved, house, shots, wound, them, persimmon, lipstick, so those are, like, that's really a really great way to kind of, like, at least that I've found, to kind of say, hey, are these line endings where I want them to go? Just read them on their own, and, like, this gives a really good sense of your mom, right? This persimmon, there's wounds, or wound, sorry, but that, again, like, probably not a accidental word choice there. Shots, house, so these kind of things, even though they kind of seem to contrast. And we have, like, search, find, backyard. So, like, this concept of your dad kind of continually, or the speaker's dad, sorry, the speaker's dad, um, kind of seeking but not finding, and this, like, endless search, I think, is really interesting. But I don't get that as clearly from the context or the content of the poem. So I wonder if, I mean, maybe that's not what you're going for, but I do definitely feel, um, this kind of broken home warmth when we talk about the mother, and this more, kind of searching but not finding, uh, and this kind of endless, and unfruitful search, from the father, and then, the speaker, sense, so sense, so we have, that sense, beds, ladders, greyhounds, apartments, daybreak, year after, year, left, up, sky. So we kind of have this transient thing that kind of brings us up to the sky and back to, like, kind of the celestial concept of the collection. So I think, in terms of the structure, I think the structure is actually really interesting. And this is 9 here. I probably gotta, the flow of idea and structure of this poem really works, but I don't 100% feel like I'm getting the emotional impact of these, you know, different journeys of the speaker's family. Again, right? Very subjective. I, I'm a bit of a forehead. I'm a smooth brain. I don't have all the wrinkles. I'm not super smart. I'm not a wrinkle brain. I'm a smooth brain. So sometimes I might need it more spelled out than another person. So, though I think it doesn't need to be more spelled out. I think it just needs a little bit more concrete language, like more specificity. So, like, especially around the father's pain, like that just needs to be a more specific word. Um, yeah. Okay, Moonjar 90. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to read this. So I'm going to go the dark side and then read the light side. So we'll see. So poet Stephanie Mallarme. The imperfection of language consists in their plurality. The supreme language is lacking. The diversity of idioms on earth prevents anyone from uttering the words which otherwise at a single stroke would materialize as truth. It's interesting. I was actually reading a philosophy book, talking about some concepts similar to this, and obviously, like, kind of this deconstructionist idea of hyper subjectivity. Not something I particularly ascribe to, but I think that's a really beautiful way to express it. It's a beautiful way to express that idea of kind of deconstructionism and this kind of the subjective risk of language, where everyone is bringing a cultural context and ideas to their language, and there's this idea of not being able to know something like comprehensively, I guess. But anyways, I don't know, because it's a different world. Barbara speaks Spanish. I'm sorry, I'm just catching up on your chats, Alexis. But the story is based in English characters, so they have to see movies subbed. Translators don't know what they're doing, but neither does the writer. Send help! Can you tell I'm creating this as I type? My characters are so dumb. I love it. Well, I'm just so glad you're having fun, Alexis. I think that is something to maintain and to keep an eye on. And it's okay in the process of writing, especially a comedy and kind of a silly, just fun project, just to check in and say, am I still enjoying this? Am I still having fun with this? And if you find like, my kind of excitement's flagging or I'm not having as much fun with this, it's okay to maybe just say, okay, I might put it down for a little bit, or, say, I'm going to take this section, just get that to a finished area or a finished kind of idea, and then try to get that shared out, But yeah, I think that's awesome. It's great to just hear you having a blast with your writing. Okay. Yeah. Perhaps it's the liminal space between languages that we begin to hear the soundings of what Mallarme calls supreme language. Most days we skim the outskirts. So again, I like this use of a different voice, right? Instead of a poetic voice, this is a narrative voice. This is an expository voice. I think that's a really good choice. And it's like the darker side seems to be more thematically the expository side, right? Maybe I'm mistaken, but like I like the association of the dark side of the moon with the more academic voice, and the plurality of voices is bueno. Most days we skim out skirts of words with an intention, completely content to collaborate in a language's hidden complacency. If language were not lacking, what use would we have for poetry? The desire to stammer through those parts of language that echo each other. To hear those echoes requires stepping outside of our own vowels, where our longing no longer to belong, or longing is no longer to belong to one language. So I like the use of the long O's with the assonance there, but it's a little bit of a tongue tire if you read it out loud, where our longing is no longer to belong to one language. Don't know if that's intentional. I like love the use of that. Like I think repetition can really highlight something. If that's a section you really want to highlight, then maybe keep it. But let's see. It's page 10 still. Okay, traceable language, its inner seams. My curiosity for Munjar starts at the seam. Their visibility, their texture, two separately created hemispheric halves are sealed together by hand. At the seam where irregularities form are made visible. What occurs at the seam? I think of all the seams in my life, how some were hemmed. So again, we get this more personal voice coming from the speaker on the right side. How some were hemmed to keep the outside from rushing in, and the others remain helplessly fissured, a crack permitting admission. What do I think about that? That right side. So I like this idea of the seams and where things come together. These languages, or even um, hmm. The little space between languages, are we getting into sounds of alarm called supreme language most days? Its inner seams. Yeah. So I like the idea of this poem where you have this kind of idea of potentially meaning coming in through the seams is maybe what I'm getting in some ways. I like hemmed in to keep the outside rushing in, the others remain helplessly fissured, a crack permitting admission. And this desire of this tie of this language into this vulnerability of wanting to be safe and close oneself out, and also kind of the inability to do so. Let me think. trying to think more on the craft layer. I mean, that's kind of what I'm gathering. I hope it just helps me to it helps you just to hear kind of my out loud conception, because you could be like, Jeff, you're totally wrong. I should rewrite that because that's not what I'm trying to get people to get out of it. Very good. That's hopefully helping. Again, I feel like this right side, the light side, could benefit from more concrete language. Like impurities that have to, with, the 2K, degrees, those types of things. Like, I think, I do like the thematic concepts, of this, these seams as a place to close up, and as a source, as a source of vulnerability. Yeah, whether or not I interpreted that right, or even just was trying to yeah, I don't know how I would change these, and maybe I'll get a better sense as I go through the collection, or what I would tweak. I mean, it's very well balanced, so I think the things that I think about is I lose a little bit of I have to really kind of I lose a little bit of how all these pieces connect together. So I think that might be, I see, the seams down here, and this is connecting into the seams. So this one actually seems more, I guess, whole than the previous one. So maybe that's okay, but interesting food for thought. Anyways, I'm going to keep going. TransPacific Passage through hunger. I wake up famished after dreaming of my Halmuni, her sturdy hands spooning gal bijem into wooden bowls. At first night, I Godzilla Google maps for every Korean restaurant. I Godzilla Google. I don't really get the Godzilla Google thing, but yeah, that's a minor note. I'm assuming it's like, being kind of odious, and like, being an obnoxious person that's Googling at something, but anyways. Kimchi fries, bulgogi sliders, not your grandma's kitchen magic, are $50. Out $50 and still hungry. Always some price to pay for half-assed passage. I don't disagree. Who's known gratification so meager? I meant to write a poem on hunger, but instead I go to the market, carry the harvest back, direct my clumsy hands to mice, ginger, pit, jubies. There is no pre-made broth for what eats away at me. The pot is on the stove, humbles me, makes me wait. This is interesting because this is a concept you talked about in your podcast, which is like waiting for food and having kind of this more process-driven food. So I think it's really awesome. I think this is I think these are all really good themes. I think these are really, really good themes you're talking about. And I think this is probably one of the stronger poems because, at least from my reading, because it starts with much more concrete ideas, and it's just an easier to absorb poem, right? Like, so the more abstract, the more types of language you're using, the more, it's it's like the video games I've developed. Like, if you make a chess video game, which is a very complex, advanced game, you're going to have a much smaller market. But though that small market will love it. If you make this other hexagon video game that we've just made recently, much bigger market. So again, this is a more marketable poem. This is a poem that I feel like will appeal to a wider audience, right? It's more accessible. That where you tune your accessibility is really your choice. But this poem is a more accessible read, and it's a good break from the more complex multiple voiced poetry. So yeah, I think that's really it's interesting, and I like the concrete details. I think this does a lot better job of being very, very concrete and very specific. Makes me wait. I make it in the quiet in the kitchen from scratch. Consumptive of the BTS. Should I like Google what BTS means? Will I be sad? Oh, the Bulletproof Boy Scouts? Oh, okay. Oh, is that like the K-pop band? Or... Gotcha. I think I've heard of that. Great. Wait, are dragons safe? Wait, can dragons have panic attacks? What if cats could have panic attacks? Wait, can dragons have panic attacks? That's awesome. I like that concept. That's a really great narrative question behind the scenes where they're just like, my treasure. I mean, if there's anything that's OCD in the fantasy world, it's a dragon and their treasure, right? So I like that idea, Alexis. Hungry husbands, one ocean and two continents away from my mother. I shall Chestnuts holding her in memory the time we disembarked in the magnificent corner of West 27th and 7th into an impossible, inhospitable corridor of cold, and the smell of chestnut carts making her salivate from so great. This is also more sensory, which I think is something that's not as present, right? The sensory details of smell and taste are powerful here. I wonder if using the using more if using more of these like non-sight and sound senses can punch up some of the urgency of the other poems. So I think because like a lot of these sensory details make it feel very present, uh, and it makes us feel very there. So I think that's like one of the valuable uses of sensory detail. I mean, it's very, very common in fiction, right? You want to try to hit all the five senses as often as you can without just being like obnoxious. Like, why is this person licking a table? Like, we get it. But using all those five senses can be a really, really powerful tool, and it's really making this poem and my reading stand out a lot stronger. And maybe it's because I have that context from your podcast. But again, it is at least reading pretty effectively here. I salivate for past forms of girls zigzagging wintered side alleys of Seoul, picking up a paper cone of roasted chestnuts to keep her mittened hands warm. A long way home. I ladle broth into the bowl, dip my spoon into the hunger that bore me, till scraping bottom, a shell of my longing heart's pitted of a place we are not. Okay. Yeah. A little broth and bowl dip my spoon in the hunger that bore me, till scraping bottom, a shell of my longing. Yeah, it's like I like this use of smells to connect past and present. Again, another reason to use sensory. Use of smell to connect. And the hands are on a long way home. For some reason, this turn does not, to me, feel like I like the idea. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's landing 100% right now. Though I don't know if that's just my own reading or if it's a craft thing that I might be able to like think about. I ladle broth in the bowl, dip my spoon into the hunger that bore me till scraping bottom. I think it's because we, yeah, the bowl seems to come out of nowhere. I think yeah, maybe that's what it is. Like the ending, the idea of the ending is good. Is strong, but The pot on the stove, it makes me wait. Okay. I ladle broth into a bowl. I guess there's the bowl. Dip my spoon into the hunger that bore me till scraping bottom. The hunger that bore me. I don't really know exactly how. I guess if like the speaker's childhood had a lot of hunger in it. The shell of my longing heart's pitted of a place we are not. Like some pets you have tame and well trained the pets, some people don't. Because they have them for the image. These uncared for dragons are called the unloved or the untamed. Aww. That's sad. Poor dragons. They just like little miniature dragons. The idea of ending is strong, but uh, I don't feel like I transitioned smoothly back to the present scene of, the character, ladling soup in the bowl. Uh, and, shells don't seem like they belong in the present frame either. So that I think maybe is where I'm at, and obviously, so to me, this jump back into the present, the long way home. I ladle broth into the bowl, and I guess we change roast chestnuts to keep the girl zigzagging wintered. Ellie's in the side, so picking up a paper cone, keep your mitten hands warm. A long way home. So we don't really change tenses, right? Because you're using the ing, zigzagging and stuff like that as your verb. So there's not really a tense change, right? So that could be a cue if you shift from past to present. Maybe, maybe consider, oh, I shouldn't do that. Okay, there we go. Maybe consider shifting into past tense in the, in like the inner. I think there's two things. Like the transition out of the introspection out of the thoughts feels a little bumpy because it's like mitten hands ladle. I ladle broth into the bowl, and that's not too bad, but it's a little bumpy. But then we get back to a shell, a shell of my longing, and the shell implies chestnuts, but there's not chestnuts in the present scene, and maybe that's like this metaphorical connection. Granted, and then heart's pitted. Like I'm trying to think of like, oh, is there like a like a grapefruit pit. There's not been any stone fruit here. So again, just I feel like there just needs to be a little tuning at the end, not much, but a little tuning at the end to make that one land. At least stronger for me. But I think that the concept, that one's probably one of the stronger ones I've read so far. So really great job, good job. Cans of spam were disported. The Boudet GJ. Army stew. Untamed rebs are feral, but that's illegal. If you have a dragon, you have to take care of it. Yeah, I know. If only people did that for their office dogs, right? Cans of spam were bestowed, a parting gift, ditched in disarray at army bases. Soldiers counted small wins in the ruddle, processed meat, ramen, rice cakes. So this is strong, right? Like I think about that first poem that had so much abstraction in the beginning that when we got to like this kind of camp and this more kind of militaristic environment, it was hard to kind of connect the dots a little bit. But the fact that we're starting with something as concrete as a can of spam, that's like very, very connected to military. It's very connected to like kind of a lot of those ideas. So I think that's a pretty strong development. Welled on top with cheese, clean cut squares of American cheese, blistering over the small pot of stewed noodles, bloated across a sea of red hot chili pepper. Yay! Hot chili pepper. Specks searing in stone. I don't know if you're trying to like reference the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but just food for thought. I don't know if that's intentional. The steak searing in the stone, piecemeal memories of what was once whole. My mother packed eggs sunny side up, spam slices golden brown in perfection, tucked into my lunchbox. Kids could not grasp the modern lunch meat marvel. My salty paradise reclaimed from tin cans. So golden brown and protected, tucked in my lunchbox. Kids cannot grasp the modern lunch meat marvel. My salty paradise reclaimed from tin cans. Piecemeal memories of what was once whole. Alright, let me just read this again. Reporting gift. Soldiers counted in small ones. The rebel processed meat, ramen, rice cakes boiled on top with clean cut squares of American cheese, blistering over a pot of stew, noodles bloated in a crust sea of red. Peace moved memories what was once whole. My mother packed up. I also am curious, like, right, because like this mix of like the traditional, um, like the chili pepper flakes and ramen and rice cakes, and also, uh, not really, and the processed meat. Like, I think that's like a really interesting thing to play with. Like, I uh, wonder if the idea of like the American food products and the Korean, uh, if I could spell, some smell details. So again, right, because we have taste come in when we talk about salty, my salty paradise. That's a really, really sharp detail. But again, I don't really get much smell or any other because we're talking about food. We're talking about this thing we're cooking. But I kind of think we need both the descriptions of what's being done because like that, you're using lists. It's a very, very powerful tool, but also giving me some of the impressions that those things are making on the speaker would be interesting. Consider adding some of the sense impressions these foods are making on the speaker. But yeah, overall it was a good one. um, uh, Put this in blammo. But those dragons usually brought from the soldier evolution program is prepared to fight a war. Oh, that's cool. That's a really cool idea. Like kind of these. Have you read the Tenemir series? The Tenemir series, Her Majesty's Dragons. Have you read Her Majesty's Dragons? That's a good one to read if you. Yeah, you should check that book out if you like kind of this. Yeah, you should check Her Majesty's Dragons out if you like that kind of like that concept. It's a pretty cool take. The first book was good. The second book I couldn't get through, but I'm sure other people say they're amazing, so you should read them. Um, all right. The last of the sanctioned lunchbox poems. The World Heritage Day rolls around and I ask, will we make something different this year? Uma says in her sensible voice. Okay, so I really like that use of this sensible voice detail. This makes, deliver what people accept and want from our culture and don't shake the boat. Yeah, so I think that's a really, really great take. So I think this is actually another really, really strong poem. Um, so I actually would be really curious, and maybe if you watch this video, you can tell me. I always am curious about the decisions poets making when they're breaking up a poem and they're using the different parts of the page. I kind of can see some of the idea behind it. But again, I'm always really interested about like, okay, why are we breaking it up like this? I mean, I feel like it's this separation of the cultures is maybe what you're going for. I could be totally wrong, or like this, this further fracturing by kind of conceding one's culture. But Americans love Googie. Why make anything else? Your teachers keep coming to my booth for seconds. They're still talking about how good it was. Um, so yeah, I like that. Let's just tweet this. Um, All right. Alrighty. Okay, and that's not seemed well in society. So because of what? When dragons got brought into Sept, they owned it. The owned it does it secretly. Interesting. Interesting. It's a cool. The owned it does it secretly. Oh, so like if you like kind of smuggle in a dragon, you have to kind of keep it on the down low. I like that idea. Reminds me of Hagrid. I just reread Harry Potter though, so that could be biasing my. Right, we're about halfway through, so I might have to go a little bit faster because it is getting a little bit late, and baby needs to eat soon. Okay, zero gravity. Um, the first Korean astronaut. That's awesome. Paradise packed in a tin can, salted and freeze dried. Space kimchi sanctified for the Odyssey. So again, we have a lot of this tin can packing imagery to coming close together. So if I'm thinking about collection, how you would form this as a collection of poems, we have this, tin can imagery coming again very soon after the spam poem. These feel a little too close together in the collection. Consider spacing out. Salted, because again we have the same like paradise tin can salted and freeze dried. Space kimchi sanctified for the Odyssey with the first astronaut to brave Earth's gravitational field. She was commissioned for cosmic inquiry. Can flies fly in outer space? At what pace do hearts beat in zero gravity? Over and over she watched the sun rise, examined the small blue marble floating lonesome, eyes tracking the orb for a glimpse of peninsula too tiny to spot till darkness lit up the tinseled edges of home, brilliant, stark, and separate from above the 38th parallel. Again, I like the inverse parentheticals. One thing, if you're writing a space poem, you should definitely listen to some of the astronauts talking about being in space. There's some really, really cool writing tips you can get. Or like I think one guy I listened to was on a Writing Excuses podcast where they interviewed an astronaut, and he had some really cool just talking about like the fact that he's like space. The darkness of space is three-dimensional. It's a tangible thing. It's like the blackness is something like the emptiness isn't empty. It's like this like physical thing. It was a very interesting. I wish I could pull it up. I don't know where it would be, but something to think about. I think you can get a lot of really cool and unique imagery if you do some research on space stuff, because obviously people have been there and they talk about it a lot on YouTube and podcasts and stuff. So definitely check that out. I'm sure you've probably already done a lot, because like like the details of what this person's mission was. But yeah, something to consider, and hopefully that would help. Apogee. I'm guessing that's when it's farthest from the Earth. It expands to imagine what life would be like if betweenness was center. The point in orbit of the moon, farthest from the center of the Earth. So like these sections, I want to see, potentially. So I can talk about in the general, like the apogee. So I think like, um, I want to see these poems show like the cultural separation at its worst, the most distance between the two lands sort of thing. That's what I would like kind of say, oh, this would be a interesting thing, like where these upcoming poems um, show like that darker side perhaps. Boom, moon jar, beautiful. That one got a little whoopsie there, but again, really, really cool. Probably intentional. It goes to show how much I know about pottery and potentially poetry. Moonjar 180. Okay, so now we're kind of in this fully emotional, or like not emotional, but kind of the more poetic language is what I'm guessing, where it's more I. Again, so this is expository again, which is a bit of a thing, because like when you're a reader, you're like trying to figure it out, right? And so I think that's maybe we get the I down here, but uh, yeah, it's page 17. I expected, not, black background, the light background to be more poetic and not have expository language. So this felt a little off. Perfection is never the Moonjar's maker's intent, but the Moonjars are an endurance of failure upon failure, in what she calls her graveyard of almost masterpieces. Artist Park Son-yuk plummets her pottery into the earth before burial. The resounding clatter makes the durability and fragility of Moonjars apparent all at once. So when dragons are brought into the step, yeah, and after what they simply buy another one that looks the same, is just called Prince Pierce. His name is Laduces, and the head of Step is one of the main character's father. That's awesome. Sounds like you really. I'm amazed at how much you've thought out of this world since last night when you came up with it. So that's awesome. Bad person and a worse, bad father and a worse person. So he's sort of like the Fire Lord Ozai. Fire Lord Ozai. The resounding clatter makes all the durability and Frangi's Moonjars appear at once. Korean was the language in which I was always wrong. English is the language that gave me away. One of my earliest memories of language was receiving back birthday cards from my mother, in which my lovingly labored Korean was turned into a crime scene of unpid marks for all the places I aired. Thus, my control complex to find the right words was born. Decades later, I joined an improv workshop to see if I might clear myself of such rigidity. Oh, improv is fun. Of rigidity, and rearranged the furniture of my mind. At the year's end, the evaluation from my instructor reads, "When you don't know what to say, why don't you try to say it in your native tongue?" It wasn't until picking up new language that I began to find a third space, both a secret place to rediscover the pleasure of fumbling through the dark for new words. So yeah, so this top section, I think this needs, because like everything else is in the, yeah, I think like the other two stanzas are in the, poetic voice, but consider at least adding the first person in the top section. I don't know. Yeah, anyways. It wasn't until picking up the language that I found a third space, both its secret place to rediscover the pleasure of fumbling through the dark for new words and connecting space to retrace the Korean words and their Chinese character derivatives, an outpost of language unreachable from the keepers of my mother tongues. The secret place, an outpost of language unreachable. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like finding your own place. I like that. Yeah, this is a fun one. I like that a lot. Cool. Family relations document. Cool. I think the documents are interesting. I like it a lot. I think it adds. I think the documents do add some personal character. Adding, kind of the documentary side of this journey for the speaker. They don't seem to connect to any poems. I wonder if a poem, talking about their contents would make them fit closer in the work. Yeah, oh, I love creating. That's awesome. Basically, his best friend is the king, the other main character's father. Oh, that's great. Alexis, you're a machine. That's very impressive. Okay, so variations of the Moon family name from Wikipedia's Moon, Korean name. Moon door. Yeah, okay. To ask, to listen, writing. Name of body of water, warm. Design, pattern. Delmoon, plural marker for people. Monk the moon, to decapitate. Nice. Lips, to kiss. Dizziness, disorder. Mosquito, cloud pattern, to polish. So I actually kind of like this sort of it feels like a search for the moon identity, right? I like that there are so many different options. I like the variance and the options here. It really reads, and you know, coming from the sample text, it really reads like, you know, who among these moons am I? I think that's a really great pick of a sample text. Mine is the fourth moon, but I see myself. So let me see. Writing? Yeah, let's go. Just kidding. I think that's probably as both as myself and plural moons, both asker and listener, kisser and decapitator. Ooh, yikes! Just kidding. No. Mosquito buzzing above the lonely, warm body of water. I recognize my younger self turning and whirling dizzy in the backyard like a dervish waiting to be captured, catapulted into a cloud-patterned sky. A family name, a door, whose threshold I'm constantly crossing. I like that one. This one's a really, really strong poem. I think the found text or the sampled text is really a great thing. I like this finding of the identities. I wonder if it can have an evolution. Like, I think, I wonder, I like this poem a lot, but I wonder if it can have an evolution. Thinking, the speaker, like the speaker thinking they're just one of these options before they realize they can become all of them. Yeah, but I mean, but that's just an idea. This is a really strong poem. Boom. Family relations register. Tear asunder between writing language word. Pillar column. Tear asunder between. Tear. Lots of Korean. Plum tree. Loss of Korean citizenship, marriage. So I actually think this is really interesting. So I hope this is you drawing this stuff in, and this is just not native to the document. Heavy, important, serious, strings, young, brother birthday, metal, kind-hearted, pair. So I like that this relates. I wonder, so again, like the drawing on the document, this is on what, 22? The drawings on this document makes me wonder if you, like drew slash blacked out words or, wrote a poem between the lines of one of these documents. How that would land. Yeah, maybe like obviously don't use the originals, but maybe like print one out, get it like really, really good quality, and then like, write on the margins, draw pictures, like do all this crazy stuff, and that might be a cool way of, because especially for like someone who, does not, read, this is going to not be like very meaningful to me. So I think like these loss of Korean citizenship, like these types of little benchmarks are really, really interesting. And this piecing apart of the names is really, really interesting. But again, all this other stuff seems to just be like an unknown timeline with these like marriage, loss of citizenship. So like those are really interesting kind of benchmarks in this like muddied journey. So I wonder if, that can kind of get highlighted where you talk about the marriage, like she always cared about him, blah, 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 blah. You have a little spiel on the marriage, and then it's just like more kind of pieces of this journey we don't understand, and then boom, loss of Korean citizenship. I left home. We left together. Those types of things can be really, really interesting to play with, and you could do that potentially on one of these documents. All right. Just called his best friend Prince. I'm running on 3 hours sleep, so I am slow. Well, get some sleep, Alexis. You don't have to stay up and watch us. It's all. Well, I'll still be here another night, so do some of those meditation apps. Get some Z's. Don't drink any caffeine. Yeah, but you're still in college. You can still do that and survive. I'm old. It doesn't work so well for me. I refuse sleep. I'll just start like speaking in like a really monotone voice and let you gently drift off. I'm just kidding. All right, Sunday afternoon, tracking names given to Chinese characters. So I'd seen that's what you did up there, and I wonder if like that could just be expanded on and be its own thing. So I think this interpretation is really interesting, exposition coming out of those documents. But I wonder if on those documents or even another one, you really just blow it up. As in a pair from a pear tree, Shan is in blessed, good iron, sickle, samarium, heavy, hard, silvery metal, is into cleave. Zong, heavy, weighty, important, serious, precious, valuable, don't do often, repeatedly, light pink, glow, red silk, sunset hues. Li, plum, tree, yuan, wall, city, lustrous and transparent, character script when writing, language, literary composition, writing, post, pillar, support, lean on, execute by tearing the limbs with the horse-drawn cars to tear asunder between chariots as punishment. Yeah. So that's what writing is. It's a very apt description of writing, which is writing, composition. It's a support in hard times, and then it rips you in half with two chariots. So I call my mother with an onslaught of questions. Why my father named carry such violence to his ligaments? Whether she sees my brother's aura coinciding with the blush of his name, and what to make of all these plum and pear trees. She answers in her sensible voice. Sense is not always made through meaning. Our names were conceived on the number of strokes in a character, the exact time you were born, the abundance or scarcity of the element at the time of your birth. I abandon my meaning making in remembrance of definitions, why they exist, rarely a final destination, a point of departure on the map of my imagination. This is an interesting piece. Meaning and language. Meaning and language and naming is interesting, and the abandonment is a cool turn, but I feel like that turn could be sharpened. Drive to more specific language on what this means, or consider imagery. I mean, you have the map of my imagination, but that imagery it feels like a little non-specific, like a map in an imagination is something that maybe is more generalized, and maybe it's like finding that like the point of departure. Like a really specific thing is that Greyhound station, or something like that, like those specific points of departure that we've had come earlier in this poetry collection. This could be a good place to have them come back. Need to work. Oh. How's it going? Hanging in there, Alexis. That's good. That's good. A huge contrast in this world. Like these Moonjar 270. When fired at high temperatures, okay. And is that saying Moonjar? Okay. So again, we almost have, okay. And it's just saying Moonjar, artist Il or Ik Jun Kong describes the relationship with artists have with the moon. It places immortality in connecting station to the other world. What risk does passage to the other world entail? To be between languages is own kind of connecting station. To connect a constant state of living in and through contradiction without ever grasping solid ground. To be born in this country is to be both gifted and wounded into a theater of contradictions. What transformations might occur? One of my friends, actually, I wonder if it's in here. She wrote a poetry book called Mother Tongue. I should definitely put you all in touch if you want to connect with other poets. But it talks a lot about language and stuff too. I actually read it. I don't know where it is. When I moved, all my books, they vanished. Let me go see if I can find it. Hold that thought. I'll be right back. obviously, this is the book, Mother Tongue Apologize. Ugh. So this is the book, Mother Tongue Apologize. Really good book. Um, I mean, this is kind of more about the loss of her mother, but also kind of the cultural aspects of that. Um, Trying to find one that has some language stuff that I thought was interesting. Uh, um, yeah, maybe she. Yeah, maybe not. Um, yeah. So she does one poem that's really good. It's called Shorthand Violence. Physical force. Any minute, the curl of his fingers caressing a Scotch glass can round into a fist crashing the spine of a wall. My father, his love, a complex bend held in oak with finishing notes of honey. Self-directed. To look up, and this is like the ABC. Like there's kind of this definition set. Self-directed. Looked up how to kill. Refused to look up at the ceiling fan. Look up at the insects on the night lamp. Verify if dead or wise with too much light. Threatened or actual. All the letters are odes to spaces. All letters are odes to spaces. Mother left behind. Addressed to father, never to be sent. So again, like this is kind of about loss, but a really interesting use of kind of this definitional thing that you've done. Intentional use. The year I forgot to notice your refusals each time. Okay, your hunger must be served, not induced. Deprivation. E. All of the above. So, anyways, that's not. Anyways, I remember this having more stuff about language and but I think that one's more kind of about loss and things. Anyways, but still a really good book to read. But it kind of deals with some of those different cultural issues too. Anyways, off we go. Okay. To be between languages, his own kind of connecting station, a constant state of living in and around the contradiction. To be born in this country is to be both gifted and wounded into the theater of our contradictions. What transformations might occur if we allowed our language to be affected by the language of others? If language was approached as a constellation rather than a single sphere to be orbited around. Philosopher Walter Benjamin writes, languages are not strangers to one another, but interrelated in what they want to express. Interrelation beckons toward a shared fate, a kind of intimacy. So I like that the progression is evolving towards kind of like, hey, coming to terms with potentially this. So again, this doesn't feel like the apogee, right? Like the apogee is the farthest point, maybe like the closest point to me would feel like where we're getting here. I like the fact that we're, connecting, that the speaker in the collection is beginning to, marry, these two languages and their journey. When fire high tempered in the kiln, the clay of the moon jar becomes liquid just for a flash before solidifying. In this instant, the clay is defenseless to the heat of the fire, prone to transform in unpredictable ways. The inward process that occurs in a contradiction of fluidity that must be passed through before arriving in a state of final stillness. So I really like this left section, but again, like I don't see the personal. Like these are pretty. This one is probably the most impersonal. This poem, uh, has interesting ideas, but doesn't connect to the speaker too much in a personal way. This is probably fine, but I don't have as strong of an emotional reaction. Okay, 4 pages left. We're doing pretty good. It's a great work so far. Voyage into Hyperdimension 1. I'm not the only one who came in search of things lost. The scholars arrived late to find bookcases filched bone dry, silk-bound books, regiments of shelves stand witness to forgotten dynasties. Transition passed down the millennia meant for truncating, annexing, and estranging. Mountains depart, further east and further west, erupting from tiny shut drawers and seat cushions. No one anticipated the exodus of ancient wisdom. What response would rupture would raise from below? Fault lines scatter any semblance of symmetry. Crags hurtle by, unmooring the horizon as they watch fabled enclosures gape wider and wider. I like this one. This one kind of reminds. I like the fact that the visual aspect matches like the content, that we're having these gaps, and there's gaps in the sentences, or in the lines. I like the idea of this like lost knowledge, right? And this fact that like so much of the knowledge of our of our, or even of our like, own grandparents, that's been lost. I think that's one of the things that, as I think about even my own experience with my grandparents, like, he used to do all these, like, he was a pharmacist, so he had a lot of these different formulations and really cool things that he'd come up with. And they were kind of lost as well, which is really sad. um they're cute. Yeah, so a long time ago, a person did agree and collected people to create his kingdom. They used science, the kings' knowledge, and lost the war. And now there are 2 kingdoms in the same continent. I forgot the names of the kingdoms. I don't know, Alexis. It might sound like you need some sleep, but that could just be me. Maybe I'm just sleep biased because I'm old. The young. It's not fair. But I like this. I think. I kind of, again, I feel like Crags hurtled by fabled enclosures get wider and wider. This, doesn't really, you know, this this poem might benefit from a slight turn or a small, line talking about the impact the loss had on the speaker. Just like the past I can't get to, or I'm not a poet, right? So like I'll leave it to the experts. Um, like the home that was is gone. Something like and just using more of those, or even just using more, whether it's just using more, personal words like home's knowledge, home, family recipes, uh, you know, uh, whatever, um, or having, a, line that touches on the emotion of loss. Um, yeah. All right. Moon mission. Even though the U.S. allies started blocking our aerospace scientists will conquer space and definitely plant the flag of DPRK on the moon. Above the 38th parable lay schools, tombs, and shrines, tactical targets marked in red on maps of 5-star generals. Steady cadence in napalm rained down, etching pockmarks and scorched skin as well. Several strata below the ground, my grandmother whispered a prayer within a crater dug out to the vast cosmos, where the cleaved country would one day claim the mission of flying their red star flag. Pundits placed bets on the unlikelihood of their adversary landing the moon. Could not fathom such desolation reaching orbit. Bodies celestial. Hmm. So this split, like the North and South Korea split, I think is really interesting. In terms of talking about it here. And I do, in terms of this being part of this collection, I think this is a great poem. I wonder if we could get a few more connections to how this relates to like the cultural split that the speaker is experiencing. Again, not a poetry expert. Something could have totally flown over my head, and I'm sure many things already have. But I wonder if this this poem would fit more in the collection if the parallel between between the fracture of North and Korea was more highlighted. It was mirrored more clearly in some of the fracture of the speakers, like split between cultures. Yeah. The cat has taken over my bed. I forget the name. How dare you? I create better when I'm tired. That's absolutely a lie. None of what I'm creating makes sense, does it? My cat has taken over my bed. Yeah, it sounds like, the creative process is chugging along swimmingly. No, I mean, some people do get some fun stuff when they're tired, but, I always just find that, I'm old, getting some sleep and treating our old, we only get one body, and treating it right and treating it with being going easy on it doesn't hurt anybody. Maybe I'm just an old fart. It's probably just because I'm an old fart. Secret extravagance. All right, I'm excited. This is the last poem, right? The bookends are important. So the last poem in the collection's a big one. A big one. We're all judging and watching. I'm just kidding now. Okay. On the eve of my beloved's birthday, I cut long strips of construction paper. Alex! Unless it's some other beloved. Just kidding. On the eve of my beloved's birthday, I cut long strips of construction paper into garlands of rings, red, yellow, blue, and pink. Pink of Pepto. Yeah. Calamine, and birthday crowns of a former 4-year-old self. So again, really great use of a concrete things to like zap that pink image and really stick that color specifically in our mind, right? The red, yellow, blue, pink, and then we zoom in on pink, and that really makes it much sharper for the reader. Marvel of architecture surging my head like a slatted lantern lit aglow with a glitter fashioned by my father before he knew manacles of rusted pipes and barbed bosses. In the middle school, sorry, I'm just thinking about some overall notes I want to give. But there comes a former from your old self, a marvel of architecture circling my head like a slanted lantern lit aglow with glitter fashioned by my father before he knew manacles of rusted pipes and barbed bosses. In the middle school, my brother came home with an assignment to build a 3D house out of paper. Nights after work, my father lit up the garage to build a palace. Blue tiles and balustrades from the Joseon dynasty, fashioned from corrugated cardboard. Our teachers were bewildered by our projects. How quiet children would nerve such grandeur. I never thought of my father as an extravagant man, but sitting at the center of all this color and confetti 3 decades later, I know different. My hands slow, all this making, baking, cutting in the memory of the epoch my father was coming of age when bread was not baked for adoration and flowers were pressed in secret between the thin onion skin of book pages. Oh, that's a great image right there. That's a good one. At the blue hour, I set down my scissors and followed garlands of lit lanterns guiding me through the garage of rusty pipes to a foot of my father's palace, glimpsing silhouettes through windows of tiny extravagances held between those familiar hands, unbound. So again, this is a great poem. It does connect to this collection, and obviously, like, you don't have to be super militant, and I know my very structured thinking. Um, you know, but yeah, it's tough. My very structured thinking makes. I mean, I feel like the lines are there between this and the collection, where like, yeah, this is how your father kind of expressed. You know, he was this very expressive person. He built these big. It sounds like models, which is awesome. I love doing model buildings. That's really cool. If I'm or the speaker's father. Sorry. I'm getting sleepy, so I'm gonna be wrapping up pretty soon here. But I hope this was helpful. Where was I? But yes, I still feel like some of the connecting tissue could be a little tighter, though. I read a lot of these. I read a lot of the poetry books, and some of them don't have super, like, some of them have really tight themes where they're all this particular type of poem from this particular thing. Other ones are kind of more piecemeal. Some of them are like really, really specific about a topic or a subject. Depends on your goals, right? Like, if you want to be more strict in terms of how you, okay, I might need some sleep. How dare you leave? The cat's deserting you. Okay, I might need some sleep. Just maybe, just maybe. In terms of this particular poem, I really like the father's journey, but um, I wonder if because it's like the only other time we've gotten the father's journey in this kind of split life, in this like kind of coming to a new place life, is in that one poem. We get a very small bit. So I do wonder if you want that kind of theme to be more central to the collection. I think if you're looking for more poems to add, I wonder if more about your parents adjusting to this new world. Like, I, like the father's journey a lot, but I've only gotten a few mentions of him before this longer, poem about, him and, what you realized. Potentially, adding more poems about your parents, journeys, you know, into, into a new culture and how they adapted to the split life, could be a great way to tie in and add depth. Yeah, all right. Okay, so the documents are placeholders, how to weave them in. All right, so let's first I'll go through the author's questions here now that I've read it. Oh, and there's one more little tiny poem that's really cool, and it's a circle, a perfect union. I have to like read it like this, right, where I like spin around in the chair. A perfect union occurs when top and bottom hemispheres surrender their individual selves to dwell in one body. The yearning between languages yields its own sort of surrealism, the strange scene where love birds lose themselves, Moonjar 360. So yeah, I did a 360 while I read it. If that's not how you're supposed to read that poem, I don't know what is. Anyways, I like that one. That's a really nice little bookend. I think that's really a nice kind of encapsulation, and it's a little bit more kind of visual, which is really great. So yeah, great job. Love it. Also, there's another really good book you should read called Night is a Sharkskin Drum. It's about Hawaii, and it's a little different, right? It's kind of about colonialism and stuff like that. But another really great. I mean, these poetry books, you can read them on the treadmill, right? They're pretty short. Um, So this is a great one. So I'll throw some like, these are some like fun reads potentially. So here are some fun reads. And then that might help. And then I'll obviously plug my friend's book because she worked really hard and she's really bright. Apologize, right? Okay. Okay, anyways. You probably have enough to read as it is. But okay, so now questions from the author, and then I'll talk about my overall notes. Whew, we're getting there. We did a whole poetry collection tonight, y'all. I think we should be really proud of ourselves. We gave this the good old college, not just try, but college completion. And thanks for sticking with me. Might in capitals, highlight in bold and cursive. Sounds like things are going smoothly over there, Alexis. Just nice and chill as always. Documents are placeholders. How do we begin? I think I talked a little bit about this, but I might just talk on these honestly. Like, I think the documents, I would love to see, potentially, draw/write poems on these documents. I am always, interested when poets do, pick words out of documents and form, maybe, translate and pick and form a new idea out of it. Yeah, I think those are always like really interesting ways of tackling documents. I think they don't, they're not like completely separate, or or do more poems, like the last doc, about doc's contents. Opportunities outside of personal narrative that can expand the set. Man, I wish I was like a little bit less zonky sleepy. For some reason, it just hit me like a brick. I was up early with the baby, so forgive me. And maybe I got happy to jump on the phone and discuss more of my feedback, and my thoughts. Opportunities outside of personal narrative that can expand the set. I think found text is really interesting, especially because you're pulling from, like pulling found text from, like news, etc. might be a cool, and like blacking out bits or selecting words might be a cool way to approach, especially like the political poems, or expand on the ideas around North and South Korea. But I'm gonna try it. I mean, I'm trying to think of some other good stuff. Which poems work from a craft perspective? Yeah, I think I kind of addressed that. Expanding other things to expand the set. I mean, I think I really, really actually want more. I want more insights into the family. The things that I want is like I want more insights into the family. Mom and dad, dealing with the same issues as the speaker. It gives a good perspective on the speaker's approach versus mom and dad. So I think it gives contrast, right? Because this whole thing is like the speaker's approach to kind of this cultural separation and this like kind of being brought into like a whole different cultural, being forced to learn a new language, like all these different things, or at least like part of it is. So then by seeing other characters deal with the same theme, it might deepen our understanding of one, the theme, and also two, the speaker. So we say, oh, this is how the speaker dealt with it, but we have something to contrast there, that speaker's approach with the parent's approach, right? Um, which poems were from a past perspective? Yeah, I talked about that collection. How does it flow, hang together? I think pretty good. Uh, Hangs together well. I think, I lean toward more connecting tissue than, perhaps other readers, but it's strong. Yeah, and then I think my overall notes, did I paste them down here? Okay, cool. So like my overall notes, continue, the good, like this is really strong, right? Like, this is a really strong collection. Like I would pay money for this and not be sad. Um, the themes you address are really important and, need to be expressed. So I think that's really, really awesome. Your use of specific, you know, very carefully chosen language is pretty impressive. The stuff that I would improve, I think the first thing is like, the high register, very, dictionary, very advanced language, will, limit your audience a little. That's something just to be aware of. Your call, kind of your call whether I think sometimes some poems felt like they could benefit from more, scene and sensory language. Smell, concrete. Uh, Whenever, you go into abstract language and, discuss abstract concepts, discuss ideas in their own realm, be careful. Consider, adding more connections to the scene of the poem so we don't lose context, and consider using more, imagery to express the abstract ideas rather than sharp. The sharp turns of phrases, turns of phrases you use are effective, but sometimes have less emotional impact for me. What else? Sensory, sometimes light. Yeah, specific language. Yeah, keep pushing. I think like keep pushing the language, especially to be more specific. Especially when you're describing emotions like pain or grief. Give us a real consider, giving us a play by play, hyper detail, so we know exactly what kind of pain this is, You know, don't make me infer the emotion too much. You know, i.e., you know, loss over his wife, you know. Versus, you know. Okay. Whew. Well, that's a lot of notes. I think we did a pretty darn good job. And I think this poet should be very, very proud of themselves. They did an amazing job. This was a really, really strong collection. Really impressive offering. So, like, it's one of those things where, you know, it's developed in a way that I do have to kind of nitpick, right? Like, this is well developed. It's thought over. You know, you've put together a lot of the pieces. Oh, I should have added in the thing. I really like the use of parentheticals. I liked that. I liked when you tweaked form, swapped, and used, you know, visual devices for effect. I think that's how you spell parenthetical. Okay, whatever. But overall, I mean, there's some misspellings in here. I'm gonna be okay with that because it's pretty late, and I need to feed my baby. So great job, though. I mean, really, really, you should pat yourself on the back. This is really, really well done. I'm excited to see, you know, when this is published and out there. You know, please send me a copy. I'd love to read it. And if you have any questions, or if you just want to say, hey, you know, let me talk about your feedback and stuff like that. This is really long. Maybe watch it on 2x speed. I know I ramble a little bit. So yeah, watch it on 2x speed. There you go. Anyways, I hope this video is helpful. I hope these notes are helpful. Best of luck in your writing and great job. And I'll see all you wonderful folks on Twitch later. And go get some sleep, Alexis. You need some sleep. Good night, everybody.